This is Catherine Dubberly, the Answer Lady, having a ball on my Kiss loom, making double comfort slippers. You can make some too. Let's get going. Now we're ready to do the heel. If you don't want to do your own math and you're referring to my book, Socks of All Sorts for Knitting Looms, the short rowing chart for heels is found on page 15, and you will just look at what are your total number of stitches, then you will choose the number that represents half of them, and depending how your loom is set up, they may not be set up the way my half is. It could be one long side plus just 1 or 2 stitches on the end, and that will work too, although I do like the wider ends for ease of manipulating the fabric. And then you'll look at, on the chart, it tells you how far to short row down, and that's what we're going to start right now. Here's my initial yarn tail, and I use it to check that I have in fact completed a round, because that's important to these coming out just right. So I don't hide my yarn tail at the beginning. It helps me keep track. Now I'm going to wrap the half of the stitches upon which the heel will be knitted. And for me, on this particular pair, that number is 18. I'll knit it over, wrap the adjoining peg, and begin to wrap back. We're still doing normal U-wrapped stitches. Nothing mysterious about this. Wrap all the way to the other end of the 18. In my case, your number might not be 18. Then we'll wrap the adjoining peg and head back and begin our short rowing. I've just knitted my shortest row, which was these 6 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll need to wrap this peg before going back, and you can see wraps on all of these other pegs as the rows have gotten shorter and shorter, and we wrap neighboring pegs every time. By the way, for those of you who are brand new to short rowing, if this is your first project, you may feel you need a little bit more detail on the subject. I have a whole playlist called Loom Knitters Sockumentaries, which has more than one video that shows more about short rowing. So don't despair if this is new to you and you feel you need a little more help. Wrapping this peg, now we're going to short row out, meaning that each row gets longer. That's 5, 6, those were knitted last time. We're going to knit one more peg over. One more stitch will be added back to the row. And before knitting back, we'll wrap the neighboring peg again. So there will be 3 strands of yarn on this peg. Let me knit these over and we'll go back and establish the pattern. And don't ever get confused. This peg was wrapped and is not intended to be knitted. This one was intended to be knitted. And if I got confused and lost count, I could resume my rhythm by counting up how many pegs had been knitted, or I could take a close look because there is probably a cross in the yarn on the pegs that wrapped because they came around and started going back the other direction. This one should be knitted. I've already wrapped this peg, and watch what happens. No matter whether I go this way or around the front of it first, it has to change directions. So that's what I mean. The yarn's going to seem to cross itself. And by the way, I don't personally believe it matters much which way you wrap, whether you go back to front or front to back when you're doing short rowing, but I do think it matters that you be consistent. All right, these all knitted last row, but we're going to add this one back to the row. So it knits over. These knit over in the normal fashion. and the next peg to those that knitted gets wrapped but not knitted, leaving 3 strands of yarn on it. That means that next time I pass this way, all of those 3 will need to be knitted over at one time. If you can't get them to neatly knit over at one time, these weren't knitted over yet, sorry about that. Let me show you what else works. Though they need to be knitted in one step, it doesn't literally have to be at the exact same moment. If I needed to, this yarn's actually not requiring it of me, but I could knit 1, 2, 3 without any harm or difference from popping them all over in one pass. And now I'm going to wrap the neighboring needle and start wrapping back as we continue to short row out. When all of, in my case, these 18 pegs are back to knitting, we'll resume knitting in the round. And so we'll get back together when you've finished getting all of your pegs back to work.